temporary sort of security people to come in and make sure things are safe. In other words, they're doing the jobs the cops should be doing in the first place, but don't do anymore. That's basically what we've got. And you know, parking ranges used to be part of the police department. The old, many remember the Grey Ghosts and Brown Bombers, whatever they used to be called. And it's now a revenue raiser. I don't think it does anything for flow of traffic, but they tell you it does. But whether they should be armed or well, they're already armed. They're armed with a book, aren't they? With giving people large fines.
The gentleman over there, right behind you, Hannah.
What happened to the drug addicts when the place was cleaned up? And secondly, I read your first book. What happened to the fellow who went down to the station one day and said, I'm the sheriff?
Well, thankfully for all of us, he's retired. And he's probably annoying someone somewhere else now. But interesting, I don't know if you saw that there was an accident last week on 4 young fellows were killed in a car on the Hume Highway, and there was $1 million or something found in the car and a large amount of powder. That is more of a story in itself. That for a long time we had the heroin drought, and the heroin drought and with the crackdown of police in Cabramatta forced many junkies to undergo rehabilitation, and that dramatically lowered the numbers of addicts using heroin. Some went across to cocaine, many went on the methadone program, which is just it just keeps them going. It doesn't really do anything for their addiction. They just become addicted to methadone instead of heroin. So what we had a significant number of heroin addicts actually got off the gear because of the crackdown, because of the drought, the heroin drought. So in a sense, Cabramatta's rejuvenation was also the rejuvenation of those addicts that had used Cabramatta to buy drugs. I just get this sense now with Afghanistan that most of the world's opium supply is now coming from there. And is this going to be a case of deja vu with Vietnam and the heroin coming into Australia? Is Afghanistan now going to mean an influx of opium into Australia? You know, I tend to think, and I hope I'm wrong, but I think the influx of heroin in Australia is already started, and we're probably going to see another massive heroin problem over the next 5 or 6 years.
Now, would there be questions or do I leave? Questions for Di Lei?
One more.
Well, hang on. You want to ask Di Lei a question? Because she
I
would
like
like
to ask you all that.
Okay. Is that a question for Di Lei at the back?
Yes, David.
Okay. Can you take a question?
Paul Hatfield died. Some years back, the police department decided that they would put Vietnamese police out at Cabramatta, and it's my understanding from the newspapers that these people were approached by criminal elements, and they basically their families were threatened, and they basically left the police force. Sort of comment on that. And is there any Vietnamese on the police force at Cabramatta now? What sort of presence has there been there?
I know that I think around that period there was there were talks.
The microphone, please. Recording purposes.
Yeah, I think it was my understanding that there was a drive to recruit police from non-English speaking background, in particular the Southeast Asian background. And for Cabramatta, I have been going out to Cabramatta on a regular basis. I mean, my family still, my mum, my sisters still live there. And I've just recently bought a property there because, you know, I'm intending to represent the Liberal Party again. I do see police out there, but not Vietnamese speaking. I don't see them. I mean, I don't know. Maybe Tim would probably in better position than I, because being a former policeman, being aware of actually what, you know, the recruitment process. At one stage when I was trying to do a story for ABC Radio National as a producer and broadcaster, I did, I think in the mid-90s, I did request the Goldman Academy to see in terms of the numbers of policemen of non-English speaking backgrounds that they've recruited. There weren't any answers given. So I don't know the numbers of Vietnamese speaking Australian policemen or women for that matter. So I can't give you an answer on that. Sorry, Paul, but maybe Tim would know. So thank you. Unless there are any other questions, I just got to duck out because I've got another speech that I have to, or event I have to go to tomorrow that I have to prepare for.
Okay, I'd like you all to give a rousing hand to Diane. Tim, you can take a few more questions, can't you?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, right. Because we've got a bit of time up our sleeve tonight. It's a rare luxury. Use that. Behind you, Hannah.
It's a somewhat difficult question to phrase or formulate properly. So I'll sort of dance around it a bit and pose it as a more of an abstract. And starting off with, perhaps as in community and policing and politics, there's a missing piece of the pie, for some reason perhaps purposely kept missing. Now to quote some of your words, or paraphrase you, Tim, you mentioned that politics and police have been cause of a lot of problems, citing the Cabramatta example specifically, but generally widen that further. Politics and policing have been the cure for that, or the solution for that. I probably would disagree there, saying it's more community standing up and taking responsibility and lobbying police and thence the politicians to solve that problem. With that in mind, what, from your frame of reference anyway, and not particularly from the police officer frame of reference, but from as a man in your community, I'll use that phrase, not reference to citizen or resident, what is a solution for the I'll call it a social problem that faces Australia as a wider context, taking into mind some countries, and specifically I'll quote Switzerland as being one of the lowest crime stats of any Western country. What is the nirvana in simple forms, as you perceive maybe?
It's curious, Switzerland also has a bit of a problem with drugs, with heroin. Probably the best example I can give you is Sweden. Sweden does just about everything right, from their cars to their planes, to their milk and their food and everything else. But Sweden went down the path of legalising heroin, and to such an extent that it became a bit of a honeypot for drug addicts in Europe before Holland and some other places. Sweden became so bad, so ravaged by crime that wasn't supposed to happen because drug addicts were getting their heroin for free now and there was no need to commit crime. Where did all this crime come from for addicts that no longer had to rob to get their heroin? And what people don't understand is crime committed by drug addicts to get their drugs is only one aspect. My experience as a cop of many years working amongst drug addicts is it's not just the addiction, the chemical addiction, it becomes a lifestyle addiction. They no longer want to go to work. They no longer look after each other, look after themselves. They don't really care where they live. They certainly don't work. So, all right, they might need a couple of $100 a day to buy heroin, but they also need money to get taxis because none of them want to travel on trains anymore, just in case the cops get them. So they're always in a hurry, so they get a taxi. And then they eat and they drink and they do whatever else. So where does that money come from if they don't work? Well, it comes from crime. So half the money if they commit a crime, half the proceeds that goes to drugs, the other half goes to support their lifestyle. So what Sweden found was was that they had an increase in crime. And it was an increase in antisocial behaviour. There was an increase in citizens becoming very frightened of their surroundings. So Sweden turned it upside down and went back to what they've got now, which is zero tolerance of drugs. And lo and behold, Sweden has now got a very safe and civilised society. They had that experiment. The whole world should look at what happened in Sweden with heroin legalisation, harm minimisation, whatever you want to call it, and what they've had to do. They've had to turn it around. Switzerland's an unusual place to sort of say, well, they've got low crime rates, because it's one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest per head capita in the world. Everyone's rich, everyone's affluent, and I don't understand why they'd have low crime rates, because I also heard they've got high suicide rates too. So Switzerland to me is not a great example. So if we go to, say, to Holland, Holland's had some problems. They won't tell you what the problems have had, but with this legalisation and freedom of drug use, it's become a honeypot for other countries. You know, like Germany and France, that might have harsher rules. They'll go to Holland, they'll use up, and they'll create havoc in Holland, and they'll go back. So there was an idea by a criminologist and his wife, academics, to make Cabramatta the first of free heroin. They would have this market. They actually told the committee here in 2001 they would have a market in Cabramatta. You more or less rope it off with police, and the dealers and the addicts could come in and buy their gear and barter, and there'd be no crime. Well, I mean, where does the heroin come in the first place? It comes illegally. Then the addicts are going to go away and use, and they're probably going to overdose, so then you're going to need to bring the police and the ambulance in, and then there'll be disputes over who's got the best stuff, so they'll be knifing each other, and it just become farcical. But these academics were serious. I mean, there is no nirvana with, in terms of drug law enforcement. You know, you shake your head sometimes when you see the influx of drugs such as methamphetamines and those sort of drugs into Australia. I mean, how are we getting to the stage where there's just new drugs being introduced in the country all the time, and how do we stop it? And I think many, many years ago, Joe Bjelke-Petersen, who's often maligned rightly and wrongly, but Joe, I think it was about 1976 or 77, proposed a law in Queensland to give anyone convicted of dealing drugs a life sentence without parole. And of course the whole of Australia collapsed except for Queensland. You know, you can't go doing that. You know, this is wrong. You can't. They might make one mistake. Well, but what perhaps Joe should have done was make it 3 strikes, and then, because if you deal drugs, you're potentially dealing the death of a human being, as it appears as though the Woodrow Commission may have become involved in. There is no excuse. Everybody knows it's illegal to deal drugs. I mean, what planet are people from if they don't know to deal in drugs in the Western world is wrong? So what we need to do, in my mind, to get on the path of recovery is start handing out massive sentences to people that deal in drugs. Eventually the message will get through to the mid-level people. They risk going to jail for the rest of their lives without parole if they get caught dealing in drugs. As it stands now, I mean, you can bring in 10 kilos of heroin, like it's 6 or 7 years. Meanwhile, your money's safe buried somewhere, and you've got superannuation when you get out. Where's the deterrent? There is no deterrent. So whether it's large quantities, whether it's smaller quantities, I think the only way to it is to lock them up and keep them locked up. And it's one less drug deal that you got on the streets, and the message will eventually get through when we start building extra jails to house all the drug dealers.
Now, is there one more question from somebody who hasn't? Well, let's wait a minute. You had a fair back of the web. Is there anybody else new on the block? Okay, off you go.
People don't realise that there are 2 states in New South Wales. One is the legal profession and the other is the natural state. people realise that behind most of what happens in the state, now that's a broad statement of the action, activities in and out of every little pigeonhole, the extent that the legal profession has to affect the actual ruling of the natural state.
Oh, you're right. Anywhere from the various courts to this Parliament. I mean, a great deal of, a great many members of the Parliament are actually former lawyers. I mean, they infest everywhere.
It's breaking the law.
So, the legal profession, yeah, so I've got some problems with the way that they are actually held accountable for their actions. And I
Well,
think,
you can go and sit alongside a bloke in a black-down court
yep,
and be thrown physically out because you haven't made any offence or any actions to create a problem in that court. It was either because I was with John, who's a fight for our rights, or it comes from this place where they're trying to stop me from naming several corrupt politicians,
right.
ministers and all, right? Now, what do you believe should be done? We're the only Western world country that has this state.
So a very easy solution for you, if you're out Blacktown Way,
No, I did the Cronulla, but I had to go and sit with the mate. I go with him
right, well,
because they arrest him all the time, and when he goes to jail, I carry home his grief.
right, there's a Dr. Michael Kennedy at the University of Western Sydney, and he would love to hear, he's after this sort of thing to get anecdotal evidence of, abuse and misuse of the political system. So it's Dr. Michael Kennedy at the University of Western Sydney. Give him a call, and I think he'd only be too happy to help you.
Right, yeah, thank you.
All right.
Now, Beverly, yes, at the back, yes.
Yes, I don't need that. I just wanted to know, if, I understood a few years ago that in New York they had zero tolerance.
Yep.
Isn't that true?
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, actually, they had the broken windows theory, which is, well, it's not a new theory, but it is a new theory as far as academics go. And how it started was the academics left a car in a street with a broken window, and it was abandoned by all appearances. And what they noticed was that over a period of days, another window was broken, and someone else come along and saw, well, it's got smashed windows, so I'll smash all the windows. Then eventually, well, it's been abandoned, so I'll rip the doors off and I'll take the engine out. And they just about stripped the car. So then they tried an experiment of leaving a car there that had no damage whatsoever and gave the appearance that it was owned. The car wasn't touched because people went near it but thought, it's probably got an alarm and there's nothing wrong with it, so I'm going to get caught. So what they actually showed that by one small break in a window actually caused an acceleration of the damage to that car, and they sort of then put it into human behaviour, which is true. It's if you allow drunken hooligans to remain drunk on the street, they'll then begin to swear and they'll urinate where they want to, they'll harass people, they'll harass girls, they'll drink, they'll cause all sorts of problems. If you don't stop them from the moment they appear drunk on the street, put them in a truck. Well, now we don't. They decriminalised drunkenness 25 years ago, so you can just walk down there absolutely paralytic, and the cops don't do anything. Now, because it's so much of a problem, we want to make it a problem. We want to make it an offence again. And they're just reinventing the wheel. This is a problem that everyone in the police could foresee 25 years ago, but no one would listen to us because the politicians and the do-gooders knew better than everyone else. Now we've got this problem, and we're going to do something about it. What do? We go back to what we used to do 25 years ago and detain them. So zero tolerance is about every crime matters, whether it's graffiti, whether it's drunkenness, whether it's antisocial behaviour. Every one of them is taken seriously, and there's repercussions to people's actions. And eventually they got the message in New York. I mean, the greatest example of law enforcement ever is that, anywhere in the world, is that New York's murder rate in 1991 was 1,640. In last year, I think it was below 500. That's over 1,000 murders less every year. So over a 15-year period, that's 15,000 people extra are alive in New York that should be dead. So zero tolerance has got a murder rate, but New York has got a murder rate that is 10 times better than ours with 3 times the population. I mean, we may only have 140 murders a year. New York has 480, but their population is 4 times the size of us. So you work out the maths, and they're all concentrated in a small area. So there's a lot more stress on the people that are living in those apartments. So zero tolerance works, but the academics will tell you that it doesn't.
Now, would there be a last question from somebody who has not asked a question? You're a member, so is any non-member still wishing to ask a question? All right, Hannah, you've got the last one. Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't see.
Sorry, yeah.
As you want. Yes.
Yeah, I actually just have a question. It actually regards Queensland law. I just read this article recently where basically there's legislation expected to pass in Queensland soon, which will enable the police to declare an organisation of more than 3 people to be a criminal organisation, and therefore, with this legislation, actually charge them with secret evidence that they're not allowed to see and that their lawyers are not allowed to see as well. And this was under criticism from Terry O'Gorman from the Council on Civil Liberties.
Of course.
And I was just wondering, I haven't heard anything about such legislation being expected to be introduced here, but for one thing, did you have an opinion on this particular legislation, and do you think it's likely that something similar might end up taking place in New South Wales?
Yep. Well, once again, using New York as an example, nobody thought in their right minds that they could break the back of the mafia in New York. They were so entrenched everywhere. I mean, whether it was business, whether it was crime itself, the mafia's fingers on everyday life were so apparent that few people thought they could do anything about it. In comes Rudolph Giuliani and his new police commissioner, William Bratton, along with a federal legislation called RICO, which is Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organisations. It's called RICO. And it basically says that if you're part of a gang or part of a family, part of a group, whatever you want to call it, crime organisation, that if one member commits an offence, you all commit it. So it's one in, all in. So if you all wear a patch and someone in that group selling drugs, you all know about it, you all go in. Now that RICO has been so effective in New York that it's just about obliterated the mafia in New York. It's got rid of many other organisations throughout America. One of the hardest ones they're trying to get at the moment is the bikies, but the bikies over a period of time are slowly but surely starting to fall apart in the States through RICO. Now what they're doing in Queensland is basically a form of RICO, and that is its common purpose. That rule has always been around in law, especially in New South Wales. Common purpose was a form of RICO, and that is if you could prove that all the group knew about what was about to happen or had some idea and could have prevented it or whatever, you could throw them all in and charge them like we did with the Milperra bikies. So this is, once again, this is 25 years on from Milperra that we're suddenly seeing we're going to bring these old ideas back. So they're bringing these RICO type legislation back to fight a menace. And it's common purpose. They all have an idea of what each other gets up to, so they all go in, they all get charged. So that's what you're seeing. And hopefully they will bring it in New South Wales, because that's the only way you're going to defeat some of these ethnic gangs and some of these motorcycle gangs.
Now let's have the last question. That will be you, Hannah, and that will be you.
You spoke of Cabramatta, but I'm one stop from the King's Cross town. That's
Right.
where I live.
Yep.
That's where one of your officers was assaulted.
Right, yep, yep.
And I lived there since '92,
Right.
and have seen a lot of crime happening, from prostitution, from everything. I ask you about not heroin, but the more modern drugs that are given to young people around the area